Good evening. We're so glad that you could join us again for another Total Transformation seminar. As we begin our final week in this series, please stay with us, as I know there will be something that will give you a different perspective about an issue or maybe modify an aspect of your life for the better. And as usual during the presentations, if you have a question, please place it on the chat and we'll do our best to raise it with the presenters. So I'll pass over to Juliet now as she introduces our first guest speaker this evening. Juliet.
Thank you, Leroy. Tonight I present to you Dr. Sham. Dr. Sham did a number of presentations last week around the heart, sleep, diabetes. He's so committed to this work. That's why he's back here again this week. He wants to share with you his knowledge, his expertise, and much more. Dr. Sham is an orthopedic surgeon who has studied the human body extensively. What he knows about live and dry bones, nobody else does. This evening's topic is entitled Arthritis. How good are your bones and joints? During the presentation, if you have any questions, please place them in the chat. The next voice you will hear is that of Dr. Sham.
Good evening once again. Thank you again for joining. And today's topic is how good are my bones and joints? I'm an orthopedic surgeon and I deal with people with problems with bones and joints on a regular basis. So today we'll look at some common joint problems. I hope you can see my screen. So today we're going to talk about vitamin D, osteoarthritis, back pain, and osteoporosis. Now, vitamin D is an important vitamin that we need in our body. So vitamin D, as you know, would help absorb and regulate the amount of calcium and phosphate in the body. So we might take a lot of calcium and phosphate in our diet, but unless you have vitamin D, you will not be able to absorb it and regulate the amount of calcium you have in the body. So why do we need calcium and phosphate? They're needed for healthy bones, teeth, and even muscles. And vitamin D deficiency can cause the bones to become soft and weak, and they can break easily. Vitamin D deficiency can cause rickets in children, and because they're still growing, the bones are soft, they can have a lot of deformities. But in the adults, it causes something called osteomalacia, which causes bone pain. So how much sunlight do we need? About 20 to 30 minutes of sun on the face and the limbs is enough for most of us to absorb enough of vitamin D. Not absorb, but to make vitamin D in the presence of sunlight. The skin makes vitamin D. Well, we are in Manchester and we have summer where it rains, we have winter where it rains, and we have all seasons when we have a lot of rain. And if we are dark-skinned, we absorb less. So we need more exposure for longer time. Now, skin cancers, people can be talking about too much of sunlight causing skin cancers, but skin cancers are not at all common in the dark-skinned people. It's only in the British and the Caucasians you will see skin cancers. Source of vitamin D, the skin prepares vitamin D in the presence of the sun. When you're exposed to the sun, the skin manufactures the vitamin D. What foods can you take to get vitamin D? There's not much of vegetarian foods, but oily fish such as salmon, mackerel, herring, sardines, and some red meat and eggs will have vitamin D. And there are not too many vegetarian foods. That's why the cereal, milk, soy milk, orange juice, most of these things are fortified with vitamin D so that we will have some vitamin D in our diet. Sunshine is free though, I'm sure you know. So whenever you have sunshine, please make use of it. But at least in the winter 6 months, we do not have enough of sun in this country, and we've got to be careful with vitamin D, and we should be able to take supplements. And treatment of vitamin D deficiency it depends on how badly somebody is deficient. So what is the source of calcium? So if you look at calcium, milk has some calcium, but it's not, if you have to take milk to get calcium, you have to drink gallons and gallons of milk. But with the amount of problems the milk brings, it's not worth drinking milk for the calcium's sake. Because nowadays everything is industrialized. The milk that you get, we don't know what hormones they've been received and what antibiotics they've been given, and they can have an effect on your health. On calcium, green leafy vegetables such as broccoli, cabbage, and okra, they have calcium. And again, soya, rice, and oat drinks, they have fortified calcium. And calcium set tofu, sesame seeds, and tahini, and they have good calcium amount. This is the reason why in India, the new mothers are given sesame oil, or the food is cooked with sesame oil so that they can get more milk for the babies. A lot of pulses you can eat. And in the UK, both brown and the white bread is fortified with calcium by law so that people can get some calcium. But calcium is present in dried fruit, raisins, prunes, figs, and dried apricots, etc. Let's look at osteoarthritis. Till now, people do say osteoarthritis is the wear and tear arthritis. Just because you get old, it doesn't mean that your joints have to wear out. But there is a lot of inflammation which happens when there is osteoarthritis. So we talked about diabetes on Friday, and we talked about how the bad lifestyle can increase the inflammation in your body, and it can cause inflammation in certain joints, which can cause wear and tear. So there is more evidence coming about the wear and tear, which is actually not wear and tear, but because of the inflammation. So some of us have only 2 knees and 2 hips, but this cartoon is showing that the centipede has so many legs. So it's saying, don't talk to me about joint pain. Now, let's look at the normal joint here. So this is a picture of a knee joint. So you see the muscle and on the top here, the quadriceps muscle, and a couple of ligaments, and you can see the kneecap right here. And the picture on the left, the blue thing that you see is the cartilage. So the ends of the bones are covered in cartilage, and the cartilage doesn't have any blood vessels, it doesn't have any nerves, and it doesn't have any nerves. That's why when we move the joint, it doesn't hurt us. One important thing though, you need to remember, this cartilage has 80% of water. 80% water. If you forget everything today, remember this, the cartilage in the joints has 80% water. So the picture on the right you're looking from the front at the knee joint, and that's what it looks like. So the blue part, light blue part is the cartilage that you see, and the dark blue that you see at the bottom is something called the meniscus, which is a different type of cartilage. Now, cartilage, I said, it's got 80% water, 80%. So the importance of drinking water and importance of not drinking too much caffeine, because it can be a diuretic. You lose a lot of fluid by drinking caffeine and cola drinks and things like that. Meniscus is like a shock absorber, which is a special cartilage which is in the knee. The synovial fluid, the fluid in the joint, is normally there. It nourishes the joint, and it gives it prevents a lot of friction. And when there is enough of synovial fluid, that is good for the joint. Ligaments support the joint, of course. Now, this is another picture showing a normal joint on the left side, but an arthritic joint on the right side. So the cartilage is worn out, as you can see on the right side. There is a lot of knobbly bits of bone on the right side in the abnormal bone. So once it comes to that stage, it's difficult to treat it without surgery and things like that. There are a lot of painkillers and not a lot of natural remedies that you can take. But once the cartilage is worn out badly, it is difficult to regenerate the cartilage. So that's the picture showing that. Now, when you look at an X-ray, just for interest, I'm showing you all. The picture on the left, like I said, you see at the end of the bone, there is cartilage. You don't see cartilage on X-ray, but you see it as a gap. So when there's a big gap that you can see here, that means the cartilage is good. And on this X-ray, the middle one, you can see that the gap is there between the bone. That means the cartilage is good. But when the cartilage wears out, the bone gets closer. Like I said, cartilage doesn't have any nerves and blood vessels, so we don't have any discomfort, pain. But when the cartilage wears out, when the bone is rubbing on the bone, you will have pain. This is osteoarthritis, not necessarily wear and tear arthritis, but there is a lot of inflammation there. Now, causes of arthritis. So this osteoarthritis is different to rheumatoid arthritis or the other causes like rheumatoid joints. So causes of osteoarthritis is if you have had trauma in the past, if there are any bony deformities, if the joint is not congruent, that can cause problems with the joint and the cartilage can wear out. Previous injuries or previous surgery is what can cause arthritis. We have spoken about inflammation already. So the prevention of arthritis is this. We need to move the joints as much as we can, because every movement the cartilage gets nourished and there is nutrition to the joint and the cartilage when you move the joint. Decrease the inflammation. So like I said, there is a lot of inflammation in your joint. So turmeric is one of the natural remedies that you can use for helping with the inflammation. It's naturally available, but it is available in stores like Boots and Holland & Barrett, and they do help. I've had a lot of patients who I recommend, and they do come back and tell me that it's better than any painkiller that they get. So turmeric capsules, that's something to try. Eat healthy. If you eat healthy and have a healthy lifestyle, there's less inflammation and it will cause you to less osteoarthritis. Exercise is always very important. Don't forget and don't underestimate the exercise. Now, when the knees are very badly worn out, we do replace the joints. So not with the Lego, but with the other instruments. Back pain. Let's look at back pain now. Back pain is very, very common, and about 70 to 80% of the adults at some point in their life have back pain. Now, this is an MRI scan of the lower back. So when you look at this scan on the left side, you're looking at these bones. I don't know if you can see. It says L1, 2, L3, 4, 5. So these are the bones, and the ones in between are the discs. So that's a disc, that's a disc. So the behind these bones or the spine, this is where the spinal cord is, where you see the bright water. So that's the spinal fluid in the spine, in the spinal canal. So if you can see, the reason I'm showing you this picture is the spinal canal fluid is white in the scan. And if you see the discs, there is some whiteness there as well. Can you see that? There is whiteness. So again, in the discs, there is 80% water. So the importance of water intake for both joints and also the discs is very important. So to come to the picture on the right side, you can see the fluid there, and you can see here, somewhere in the middle there, I'm pointing with the arrow, the disc is prolapsed out, and that is pressing on the nerve. So again, if you see the disc at the top here, it looks light gray or a bit bright. That means there is water. But this picture, there's not enough water, and that's why it becomes degenerate, and it is prolapsed and is causing pressure on the nerve. Now, what are causes of the back pain? Some of the causes of the back pain are mechanical back pain. You sit badly, the bad posture, you lie down with a bad posture, you wake up with pain. Disc prolapse, like I've explained to you. There can be arthritis in the back, in the small joints of the backs, which can cause pain. There can be spinal stenosis. So if there is a lot of arthritis in the back, it will compromise the space for the spinal cord and the nerves, and that can cause, that is called spinal stenosis. It can cause pain. But if you're older, 70 or above, if you're having significant back pain, it's always important to rule out cancer from somewhere else which has spread to the back. We do often see quite a lot of people, the presentation, they don't know they have a cancer, but they present with back pain. You examine and to get a scan done, and then it will show some, unfortunately, a tumor which is already spread to the bones. So these are the causes of back pain. So this is a picture showing the blue thing that you see is the disc, the yellow one that you see is the nerve. So imagine the disc material has gone back and it is pressing on the nerve. That's what causes sciatica. So depending on which level of the spine is affected, you will have pain going down to the front of the leg, the back of the leg, or into the thigh, into the foot. So that's what a disc prolapse is, and it causes sciatica. So this picture is showing, so the front is the big bones here, and at the back, you have this red zone that you see is all small joints of the back, which is called arthritis. So when there is arthritis there, that causes less space for both the nerves and also the spinal cord, and that causes pain. Back pain symptoms, it can be just plain back pain, or it can be sciatica pain going down to the leg. It can be pins and needles. You can get pins and needles. If the nerve is badly compromised, you can have pins and needles, and you can have weakness. If the nerve is pressed quite significantly, you will have weakness of the foot, and sometimes the foot can drop, or depending on which part of the nerve is affected, you will have weakness. And the most important thing is, if you lose control of your bowel or bladder, if you're not able to go to the toilet, if you lose control and pass water without your knowledge, pass urine without your knowledge, that's an emergency. You have to go to a hospital, and the disc needs to be removed urgently, otherwise you can be paralyzed. Treatment for this, obviously they'll give a lot of painkillers, but movement is important. In the past, back pains were treated with a lot of bed rest, but then bed rest is bad because the more you rest, the muscles will go into spasm and weak, and they become atrophied or weak, and it's not good. So physiotherapy is very important. You have to have stretches and strengthening, and there are some causes for surgery. Causes for reasons for surgery, which are pain, which is not settling down after 3 months. And if you have significant pain going down to the leg, that's the problem. Once you have a surgery, there can be recurrence because you can have a disc prolapse at another level. So that's the problem. So you've got to get fit and do exercises and have therapy. It's important to do that. To also prevent back pain is to have a lot of core strength in your body. If you're not doing the core muscle exercises for your body, you won't have strength, and that will put a lot of stress on the back when you're trying to lift anything, when you're sitting, and that will cause a lot of problems. Moving and handling, you've got to be careful with how you lift things and what you do, especially those who are working in the hospitals and all that. You've got to be extra careful. Regular exercise is very important, and I cannot stress this, that 80% of the disc is water. Unless you have enough of water in your muscles and in your discs and your bones, your body, you will suffer. Let's look at finally with osteoporosis. This picture is showing, this is the spinal body, and this is the spinal body at the back, and the bone in the center is crushed down because of the lack of adequate bone there, right? That is osteoporosis. So what's osteoporosis? So this picture is showing a healthy bone on the left and osteoporotic bone on the right. Now, just imagine a wall with normal bricks. It is strong, but osteoporotic wall has less number of bricks. So you can easily break, and it is weak. That's what exactly osteoporosis is. So the structure is there, but no strength, and there is less bricks in osteoporosis. So the best bone you have is at the age of 25 to 30. So if you're 40, you've already started downward trend on your bone density. So it can affect anybody, even at 50 and 70, 80, it can affect anybody. And we'll look at some of the risk factors as well. Weight-bearing exercises are extremely important. You have to be walking. You cannot do exercise on the phone with fingers, but you must be walking to do some exercises. The bones must be loaded to prevent osteoporosis. So what are the causes and risk factors? Vitamin D deficiency, like we said, it doesn't absorb calcium, so it doesn't make bone. Poor diet. If somebody has had an early menopause, if you've had the uterus removed for whatever reason, there's a high risk. If you lack exercise, and if your body frame is very small, your bones are small and they won't be very strong. And if you have a family history, especially of osteoporosis, and especially if your family member has had a fracture at some point, then there is risk. Women are 4 times at a higher risk than men because of the hormones and all that. So other risk factors are alcohol. If you have more than 2 units a day, or if you smoke, that's bad news for the bones. Now, what's the diagnosis and treatment? Sometimes people won't know they have osteoporosis. They come with a broken wrist or a broken hip, and that's when we test, they have osteoporosis. Bone density scan is a special scan they do where they look for the density of the bones. The density of the bone is either normal, or there is less bricks, or even worse, less bricks. So osteopenia or osteoporosis are the terms which are used for that. So the treatment, people are given calcium. Bisphosphonate is another medication that is given for osteoporosis. However, there are some side effects as well. So prevention is always good. 30-minute walk for at least 5 times a week is important, because it helps you not only your body, but it helps you with your balance, and it will help you with your strength. So if your body or the muscles are strong enough, then it will prevent falls, and you will prevent breaking your bones. I've told you in the past about arthritis. When somebody has a painful joint, it's still good to walk and do exercise and do physiotherapy. That will help in 2 ways. One, to keep the range of movements so that it won't become stiff. A joint will not become stiff, number 1. Number 2, it also keeps the muscles in good tone, so that if you need to have an operation, or even if you don't need to have an operation, for your recovery, it will help you as the muscles gain the strength and keep the strength. So osteoporosis risk factors: access. So for short form, alcohol use, corticosteroid use. So people who are put on steroids for breathing difficulties and all that, they develop that. Low calcium, low estrogen. Estrogen is the hormone in women. So that's why when you have menopause, the estrogen goes low, and that's a risk factor. So exercise is important. Smoking, sedentary lifestyle. Now look at this picture, how the woman is bent forward. That's because she has had multiple fractures in her spine, and whenever there's a fracture of the spine, each body will lose its height, and if there are multiple fractures, eventually the back will be bent. Right, so that is osteoporosis for you. Thank you very much. Tomorrow's talk is about learning lessons from the people who live long. Lessons for life from the people who live long. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Sham. Wow, there's lots of questions come in, so I don't know, we haven't got enough time, but I'm going to go rapidly. So I want to see how you can really fight through these questions. First one, which is the best form of vitamin D? And when should I take, what's the best time of day to take vitamin D?
I don't think there is any problem taking it in the morning or in the evening. Vitamin D3 is what is the active form of vitamin D. You can take it any time of the day. While you're on that, let me tell that if somebody is known to have had deficiency, then if it is very bad, then what we do is we give a loading dose of vitamin D. So give a lot of vitamin D first, and then keep a maintenance dose. But somebody who's got a normal vitamin D, they can carry on taking just a normal maintenance dose in the winter 6 months. But it is also recommended for Indians and the Afro-Caribbean people to have to take vitamin D regularly throughout the year.
Thank you. Turmeric, if I put it in my curry, in my sauce, is that going to still help fight my problem?
It does help. Depends where you get your turmeric from. So I'm from India. When I come from India, I bring proper turmeric from home. So that is good. But the curry, sometimes you may not put too much of turmeric. But then if you take a tablet or a capsule, you will take a regular standard dose. But turmeric in the curry is always helpful.
Okay, thank you. What is a disc bulge?
Disc bulge. Okay.
Yeah.
So disc is a soft material. So it's a very soft material. I don't know how to say, like a jelly. So it's like a jelly. So when you lift any weight, the weight is transmitted equally through the discs. So it's a disc jelly-like material. So, but when the weight is so bad, or when the disc is not hydrated enough, if there's not enough water, then it becomes degenerate and it loses its function like a jelly, and it ruptures, and the jelly substance will go and cause pressure on the disc, on the nerve.
I see. Thank you. Now, I may be pronouncing this wrong. Synovial fluid. How is that depleted?
Well, when there is inflammation, that's how it is depleted. So
Right.
Normally the amount of synovial fluid in the joint is only about 2 or 3 mils. It's not much, but that's normal. It's because it is healthy and it causes the joint to be nourished. But then when there is arthritis inflammation, that goes down, and also the quality of the synovial fluid is not good, so it doesn't nourish the joint anymore, and that's the problem.
Somebody's got sciatica. They want to get rid of it quickly. What is the best formula?
Best formula will be a lot of exercise. So there will be a lot of exercises on the YouTube. You have to go to a good video and do those exercises 4 to 5 times a day. Do it at least for 20 minutes to half an hour. That will take away your pain. And most of the sciatica pain is self-limiting. 90% of the time, in 6 weeks, it disappears.
6 weeks, really? Wow, that's very good. That's a challenge. Is magnesium good for arthritis?
It is good for arthritis. So magnesium is one of the elements not very commonly spoken about, like iron and calcium, but magnesium is very good for the bones and joints and arthritis as well. Yes. What
about steroids?
Steroid injection. So steroids are naturally occurring in our body, but then when you give steroid, it decreases the local inflammation for a short period. It's not a permanent cure, but steroid will have its own side effects. For example, even if you give it to the joint, it can get absorbed systemically into the whole body, and that can cause problems like weight gain, and it can cause problems like sugar control will be bad, and those are some of the common problems.
Okay, thank you. And the last question: when it rains, I feel it in my joints. Is that true about arthritis?
It is very, very common. It is true. The winter months, people do feel a lot more pain, and that's why we have more patients coming to us in the winter months. It is very common.
Okay.
Probably sunlight has some role in it. So
okay.
please use the sun. Drink water, use the sun. Those are the two take-home messages today. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I will now hand over to Lesmond.
Thank you, Juliet. Thank you so much, Dr. Sham. I believe we could have continued for a while. There are lots and lots of questions in the chat. I'm sure we're going to have you back, or we may have to do a special program with you. But thank you very much indeed. Okay, last week we looked at 5 mental health challenges and strategies to overcome those challenges. We looked at managing your stress. We also looked at moving past the past, guilt and shame, depression, and also self-control. And I'm pleased to say that we want to thank Dr. Magna Porterfield for sharing her experience and her knowledge with us. I was totally enthused last week and took some steps to make some changes. My wife will tell you that she thought I was mad. I was up and out at 7 o'clock one morning and she thought, where's he gone? He's gone. But yeah, I was walking and thinking, cogitating all that I'd learned this week, last week. So I hope that this week is just going to be as exciting. Today's topic is true happiness. I'm going to hand you over now to Dr. Parks.
Thank you so much. And it does my heart good to hear someone is making changes as a result of what they're hearing, not only from my seminar, but from the other seminar. Thank you, sir, for sharing that. It makes this worth doing this. It really does. That's an encouraging note to hear. It is evening where you all are. So good evening. It's afternoon where I am. So good to be with you today. And as was mentioned, we will be talking about true happiness. Notice I didn't just say happiness, but I said true happiness. Excuse me. And this will make sense as we talk. There are many definitions of happiness, but the one that I want to look at today is simply referring to a state of well-being. Many of us might not be diagnosed with depression or anxiety or have any of the diagnoses that mental health professionals may give us. But how many of us truly are in the best state of well-being? I became interested in this topic. There's a whole relatively new discipline in psychology called positive psychology. And this was started by Dr. Martin Seligman. And his thought was that in psychology, we tend to look at the people's abnormalities. We tend to look at the things that they are having problems with: depression, stress, anxiety, schizophrenia. And Dr. Seligman said there are so many strengths and character qualities of human beings that we can encourage that can help them to have better well-being. Some of us, as I said earlier, may not have these diagnoses, but we don't have well-being. So Dr. Seligman started this area of psychology because he wanted to look at things such as happiness, hope, which we'll be talking about the next time I meet with you all, gratitude, kindness. And he felt that if we start to look at these and give people ways of developing these positive qualities, it can help them to have better well-being. It can also help them when they are diagnosed with some of these mental health disorders. So let's look at happiness now. There are different classifications of happiness, but two that I found was helpful to share with people is the difference between hedonic well-being and eudaimonic well-being. Eudaimonic is spelled Eudaimonic, hedonic, Hedonic, versus eudaimonic. Hedonic, if you know anything about hedonism, pleasure, simply it's referring to doing things to give us pleasure for the moment. It's short-lived. It has to keep topping up you have to keep topping your reserves in order to maintain its effects. So for some people that's drinking alcohol. For others, it's having parties. For others, it may be having dinners, or just these are pleasurable things, but they're short-lived. And you have to keep topping the reserves, keep pouring into the cup in order to feel happy. It's not long-lasting at all. So that's one type of happiness. And I would say most of us, when we think about happiness, that's what we're referring to. We're looking at things that we could do short term to feel happy. That's not lasting. Eudaimonic is more long lasting. This is the happiness that we gain from having meaning and purpose in our lives. It's also gained when we fulfill our potential and when we feel that we are part of something bigger and better than ourselves. So eudaimonic is when we gain meaning and purpose in our lives, we fulfill our potential, and we feel that we are part of something better than ourselves. The interesting thing about eudaimonic well-being, I actually got this from an author who was a UK mental health professional. Her name is Bridget Grenville Cleave. She says that eudaimonic is not problem-free. Now, when we think about happiness, we think about no problems, but that's not true happiness. Paradoxically, eudaimonic well-being may not initially provide any pleasurable feelings at all. It may actually involve considerable personal hardship and effort over the long term, because remember, eudaimonic is about fulfilling our potential, finding meaning and purpose in our lives. Sometimes as you're fulfilling these goals, you may not feel pleasure. It may take some work for you to fulfill your purpose in life, for you to fulfill meaning, have meaning and purpose in life. So it may not involve pleasure all the time, but in the long run, eudaimonic well-being leads to greater life satisfaction and more sense of well-being. So I'm not saying that happiness that brings pleasure is wrong. I don't want you to get that sense from me. I just want you to understand that true happiness does not always lead to immediate pleasurable feelings. You don't always go through pleasure when you're fulfilling your potential. You don't always feel happy if you're trying to fulfill your purpose in life, but in the long run, overall, you will be more satisfied when you pursue more eudaimonic than hedonic pleasure. I hope you're getting that thing. That's why we call this true happiness, because it's not just based on feeling good. Now, there's research that's been looked at and has tried to find out what determines our happiness. From the secular research, it shows that 50% of our happiness comes from our genes. We're born with half of that. 10% comes from our circumstances. And this is just so important to remember, because many people equate circumstances to happiness. But the research shows only 10% of our happiness comes from what happens to us. And this is what makes the difference. 40% of our happiness comes from what we do. So 50% from what we're born with, 10% from our circumstances, and 40% from what we do. Now, these are not set in stone. They may vary a little, but the basic point is almost half of your happiness comes from what you do. So that means the researchers and psychologists and mental health professionals from this research has determined there are things we can do to actually feel happy, true happiness, and not just short term. Nobody is predetermined or born to be sad all their lives. There are things that we can do that can contribute to happiness. Now, granted, some of us are born with more of a silver spoon than others. Some of us are really born into some adverse circumstances. So I'm not negating and ignoring those, but no matter what your situation, there are some things that you can do to experience true happiness. And we're going to talk about that. But before we do that, I want to just mention that there are some myths out there about happiness. Sometimes we believe that happiness lies in changing our circumstances. Oh, the number of people I have spoken to. If I could just be married to someone different, I would be happy. If my parent would just do this, I would be happy. If I can change my job, I would be happy. Now, remember, there is some part of the circumstances that contributes to happiness, 10% based on the research. But 40% is what you do about those circumstances. You're in a marriage you're not happy with. What can you do to increase the happiness? Your parents are doing things you don't like. There are things you can do to increase your happiness. Your boss might not be treating you well. There may be some things you can do. There may be that you have to leave the job, but there may be some things you can do. So what I'm trying to help you to realize is that you are not a victim to your circumstance. There is something that you can do. You may have to change it. You may have to change your thinking, but there's something you can do about your unhappy circumstance. So the myth that happiness lies in changing our circumstances is not true. It's a myth. And then another myth is you either have happiness or you don't. That's not true, because again, if there's things you can do to contribute to your happiness, you can have happiness And also you may not have it at times. So it's not one or the other. You may have a mixture. Sometimes you're happy, sometimes you're not. So, you know, psychologists have actually researched people who are happy, genuinely happy, talking to family members, talking to friends, having them take surveys, wearing little gadgets that they can monitor their mood. They've actually studied people who are happy, and they have found that happy people have some common characteristics. And from this, they are realizing that if you can start to change your life to incorporate some of these habits, you too can experience true happiness. So let me share some of that with you right now. The first thing they found, and I've mentioned this before because this is such an important characteristic, is resilience. Resilience is the ability to bounce back from adversity after difficulties. I think I mentioned that word when we talked about moving past the past. So resilience is the ability to bounce back. And happy people tend to be resilient. They're not Pollyannas. They don't live out of touch with reality, and they're not living in denial. Happy people just have coping strategies that can help them develop resilience and help them deal better with difficulties and trials that may come their way. That's the difference. Here are some of these coping strategies. One is positively reframing. Positively reframing is looking for something good in the adversity you face. Happy people tend to do that. They look for something good in the adversity you face. You may be living somewhere you don't like. And instead of complaining all the time about it, you may say, you know what? This is what's happening. I'm going to think about the times when I didn't live in this situation and focus on the fact that I'm going to get out of this soon. And so I can deal with this. You're positively reframing the situation that you're in. Again, you're not denying it. You're recognizing it, but you're framing it in a more positive way. Think about whatever circumstance you're going through now. What way can you reframe that in a more positive way? You may have had a loss. That might seem impossible to do, but what can you do to reframe that? You may have lost a job. You may have lost a person. Even in this COVID situation, if you're isolated, what can you do to positively reframe it? That's a challenge I want to give you. Another strategy for developing resilience to be happy is planning. Okay, you live in this place that you don't like. We're going back to that example. Think about steps that you can take to change the situation. You might save money every month to see if you could move to a better place. You might look for somebody who's renting a place that's cheaper, but in a quieter neighborhood or more favorable. Plan. Don't just sit around and complain, but plan. So you want to positively reframe, you want to plan. And the next habit you want to start doing is just accepting the situation. They learn how to live with their situation. These are the things that lead to happiness for the people that are genuinely happy. They positively reframe, they plan, and they accept. I like what one person says, and they say to complain is always non-acceptance of what is. To complain is always non-acceptance of what is. When you complain, you're not accepting what is. And guess what? That leads you to be unhappy. Martha Washington, the wife of George Washington, our first president in the United States, says, I'm determined to be cheerful and happy in whatever situation I might find myself. She goes on to say, for I have learned that the greater part of our misery or unhappiness is determined not by our circumstance, but by our disposition. Going back to what you can do. That disposition is that 40%, what you can do for happiness. And this reminds me of a Bible verse that I try to repeat to myself when I'm in situations I don't like. It's in Philippians 4:11, and the Apostle Paul says, not that I speak in respect of want, for I have learned in whatsoever state I am, therewith to be content. I was just sharing this with a client of mine just the other day, stating to her that your situation is not good, but changing your mindset and learning, I have to accept this right now, can do a lot to help you to feel better about your situation. So we talked about one characteristic of happy people, and that's they're resilient. Another thing is genuinely happy people have mutually supportive relationship. Notice the word mutually. You want a relationship where both of you all are gaining. It's not a one-sided relationship. One-sided relationship where you may be the only one giving or you are the only one getting will not lead to happiness. But when it's mutually supportive, you all are supporting one another, that will lead to happiness. And happy people tend to have those kind of relationships with their friends, with their family, with their neighbors, with their coworkers. It's found that this is very closely related to happiness. So you want to be able to try to develop mutually supportive relationships. This was interesting research to me. It says the simple act of 8 hugs a day can increase your oxytocin, you know, that hormone that's released when women breastfeed. It's also a hormone developed when you have a trusting, bonding relationship. It's actually something that physiologically goes on in our body. It's released when we have that bonding experience. So the simple act of 8 hugs a day versus shaking hands can actually increase that oxytocin and result in a happier you and a better world. So those hugs, give somebody, try to get 8 hugs today, and you will increase your happiness. Again, we're talking about that 40% of what you can do to increase happiness. Another characteristic, we've talked about resilience. Genuinely happy people tend to be resilient. Genuinely happy people tend to have mutually supportive relationships. And genuinely happy people tend to express gratitude. More and more research is showing how gratitude can help our mental health. A grateful disposition leads to a lot of positive benefits. More life satisfaction, more optimism, more happiness, even lower anxiety and depression. And interestingly, gratitude can also lead to less envy and possessiveness. When we're grateful, we tend to be less envious of what other people have. So gratitude allows us to celebrate the present. It helps us to be participants in life. Sometimes we're too passive in life, but when we express gratitude, it allows us to participate more in life. It blocks negative emotions. It strengthens social ties and self-worth when we express gratitude. So you want to think of a way that you can express gratitude. And grateful people, they take good things as gifts and not birthrights. They don't view themselves as entitled to the things that people give to them. Grateful people, they are grateful for the things that people give to them. And once in a while, it's been found that grateful people think about death and loss. Because when they think about death and loss, it helps them to be more appreciative of the life that they have now. Notice I'm not saying ruminating on it, because remember we talked about that as a symptom of depression. I'm talking about just once in a while thinking about the fact that you can lose something or you can die. And that has been found to help with gratitude. So do a gratitude journal. I did that and helped me during a time when I actually lost my first husband. That was a great help for me. Write a letter to someone who's done something for you. Call someone, express some gratitude. Grateful people also engage in deeds of kindness. It moves the self-focus. They puts their problems in perspective when people are grateful. When people are happy. We're talking about happiness characteristics. Happy people, they tend to engage in deeds of kindness. They don't have much of a self-focus. It's found, in fact, that when you spend money on someone else, you actually gain more happiness than spending it on yourself. So that falls under the deed of kindness. Grateful people, I keep saying grateful, please pardon me. Happy people also don't compare themselves to others. They compare themselves to who? Themselves. They look at where they are now and they think of where they were before, or they think of where they can be for the future. They don't compare themselves to the other person who has a spouse and they don't, or the other person who has a nicer house or a nicer car or a job, or the list can go on. Happy people, the research shows, don't do that. The only person they compare themselves is themselves. Or if they're Christians, they compare themselves to Jesus. So I want to encourage you, if you're comparing yourself to others, start comparing yourself to yourself. You will find yourself to be more happy. In fact, I like this quote: a flower does not think about competing with another flower next to it. It just blooms. So just bloom in the place that you have been planted. Don't think about the other flower and whether you can grow as tall and as pretty, but just bloom. Do what you can to be a better person right where you are. Happy people also have good health habits. All through these seminars, you've been hearing about good health habits. And the research shows that when people engage in good health habits, they're more likely to be happy. For example, you know that when you don't get enough sleep, you tend to be more irritable. Happy people tend to sleep for at least 7 or 8 hours a day. Happy people also exercise because exercise raises those endorphins. Good posture actually also gives happiness. It sounds very trite and simple, but just carrying yourself in a good way with good posture, practicing this, the research has shown increases feelings of enthusiasm and excitement. So just practicing, making sure that you keep good posture, you will find yourself being more happy. Also, smiling more and frowning less have been lined up or aligned with more positive emotions and happiness. When you catch yourself frowning, smile, and you'll find just these little things can increase happiness. So happy people have good health habits. Happy people also, and you've heard me talk about this before, they tend to be more religious and more spiritual. This was found by the researchers. Again, these are not religious researchers. These are secular researchers. They could no longer avoid the fact that people who are religious and spiritual tend to be more happy. Now, I have to add this piece, religious and having healthy attitudes about God and religion, not looking at religion as a drudgery, not looking at do's and don'ts, but being in a committed relationship with God where you recognize him in a loving way, because the flip can happen if you're in religion and you don't have healthy views of God and healthy views of religion. So I do want to add that piece. So we've talked about happy people being resilient, happy people not comparing themselves to others, happy people having good health habits, happy people being grateful, happy people being more religious and spiritual. There are other things that that can be mentioned, but I'm just wanting to give you an overview, not comparing yourself to others, engaging in others, engaging in deeds of kindness. All of these are things that each and every one of us can do. That falls into that 40%. If you're unhappy right now, and don't base it on feelings, because happiness is not always a happy, pleasurable feeling. Do some of these things. I want to encourage you to do some of these things and see if you don't feel more happy. Now, I do want to send this caution. I know my time is running out and there might be questions. Don't pursue happiness just for happiness' sake. Engage in these different behaviors and happiness will come as a byproduct. Because sometimes that can boomerang if you're just seeking, oh, I just want to be happy. That's a self-centered focus. So make sure that you also just do these things so you can have more well-being in life. And I thank you for listening, and I hope that you will engage in these habits to experience true happiness. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Dr. Parks. Really appreciate that. I was longing to hear the word smile because I'm looking at everybody and wanting everybody to turn on their cameras and to give us a big smile. Okay, we're going to go straight forward into those questions. I can see one or two. That's excellent. Okay. There's quite a long question here. I'm going to try and paraphrase it. Somebody's saying, okay, I look at things from a negative perspective. However, this helps me to achieve and strive to my goals. Sorry, I find it hard just to enjoy interactions that have no transactional value. How would I go about unlearning this trait?
You've heard me mention this before, and I'm going to mention it again. You have to start identifying what it is that you are telling yourself. What is it about the transactional kind of relationships that you're telling yourself that you're not telling yourself about when it's non-transactional that's leading to the happiness? Is it because, oh, I can get something from this, or this is more exciting? try to figure out, what am I telling myself? If you can figure out what you're telling yourself when you get into those situations where you don't enjoy what's going on, and then change what you're telling yourself, it will do wonders to help you to be able to gain more satisfaction from those situations where you don't. So start with your thinking. And then I want to encourage you to start doing some of these things that I've mentioned. That also will start to change your thinking, to experience more positivity. I'm sure it will happen.
Okay. Thank you very much. Is true happiness a state of mind? How can we move and make this consistent, or can we really do that?
Yes, we can. You can do it. I've seen it done in the lives of people, and it is a state of mind. And so that's why I mentioned all those various things about gratitude, exercising. It's a state of mind that can be altered. And it is definitely possible, because the research shows, it's like learning skills. If you go to any place where you're learning a skill, what do? You start practicing the skills. And it's the same thing with developing true happiness. If you practice these skills, I can assure you that you will achieve that true happiness state of mind. It may take a lifetime, but it's worth pursuing.
Thank you. I was trying to see if there was some more questions there. There's one or two. I think this relates to what you've just said, actually. Do you need other people to be happy?
Yes and no. Let me answer that question, why I'm saying yes or no. Remember, we talked about happy people tend to have mutually supportive relationships. So it's good to have mutually supportive relationships, but we don't want to be dependent upon people for happiness. I hope you see the difference there. I find that people who depend on others for their happiness tend to be unhappy. So you don't want to depend on others for your happiness, but you do want to have people in your life. I hope that makes sense, what I shared. Not dependency, but having them so you can also contribute to the relationship.
Yeah, that kind of aligns with what you were saying about we've got 50% genetic, 10% circumstance, and 40% is about what we do. So yeah, that aligns with that. Thank you. How do you? Sorry.
That's okay.
Yeah, how do I nurture my happiness? That's a good question. How do I nurture my happiness?
Well, let's talk about what nurturing means. Nurturing means that you do something to help something thrive and to grow and to be the best that it can be, right? So, not to sound like a broken record, but engaging in these things that I've spoken about can be nurturing to your happiness. Look at the different areas that I mentioned and assess yourself and say, what area do I need to improve in? If you focus on improving in those areas, the happiness will be nurtured and it will grow like a plant. So assess and look at where you need to come up higher, and then start implementing those areas, and you will nurture your happiness. Very much so.
Brilliant. Thank you. Okay, I think the final one. How do you
You're
indicate
welcome.
how do you indicate to someone who is in denial that they may need to modify their behavior?
Wow. You don't pray. I know that sounds real simple. It is hard to deal with people in denial. Human logic, human argument will not break through the denial. Really, I said that jokingly, but you need to pray for that person to have a breakthrough. Sadly, what really helps with these people is life circumstances where they're faced with a situation and they can no longer deny. I don't want that to happen to people, but that's what I've seen happen to people with denial. You know what else you could do? If you are a loved one living with them, you live a good, healthy, emotionally, mentally healthy life, and let them see through you what can be done to live a better life. Sometimes just modeling that can do wonders to help people who are in denial. But honestly, human logic can't do it. It has to be something outside of themselves that makes that change.
Brilliant. Thank you very much indeed. You said that exercise and posture increases your excitement and other things. And alongside that, you mentioned 8 hugs a day. We're living in a pandemic. Who am I gonna? I need to be hugging
Family
my
members.
spouse, my spouse, and my wife, and my kids, etc. 8 times a day.
Yes, yes.
Okay, everybody, you
8
heard it
times a
here.
day. That's
All
right.
right. Thank you very much indeed, Dr. Parks. Really appreciate you being with us and
You're
sharing
welcome.
your wisdom once again. God bless. Going to hand
God
you over
bless
now to Naomi, who joins us for the first time today. And Naomi is going to lead the third part of our session. Thank you, Naomi.
Thank you, Lisbon. Welcome everyone to the third session of the Total Transformation Seminar. Today we are asking the question, what evidence is there to believe in a biblical creation? And we have a wonderful man here, Pastor Dan Mahadukan, who is going to help us answer this question today. So Pastor is a pastor who served in the Philippines. So he served in the Philippines and also was a missionary to South Korea. And he's currently a pastor under the North England Conference. And he's married with a son. So pastor likes to mountain bike and does badminton, plays the guitar amazingly, and is into graphics and also is very interested in philosophy. So I'll hand over to Pastor to give us his take on why we should believe in a biblical creation. Over to you, Pastor.
The question is, what evidence is there to believe in creation story? The question is also essentially asking what evidence is there for a creator, and that is God in the Christian worldview. Well, at the outset, I have to say this. There are untruthful claims that is spreading around saying that you cannot do science without believing in evolution. Another untruthful claim is saying that all the scientists believe in evolution. Now, these claims are not true. They claim that if you are a creationist, you cannot also be a scientist. Those claims are not true. I have members of the church and also friends who are scientists, and they believe in creation. Actually, there are thousands of PhD scientists all over the world who don't accept evolution and don't accept the belief in the millions of years. And these scientists see the harmony in the words of science and the Bible. It is the atheistic scientists that have problems with that, and they created a disharmony between the Bible and science. Creation and evolution is not so much a religious argument versus a scientific argument. It's not actually science versus religion. It's a worldview clash. Two different views of origin resulting in two different worldviews that collide. And when it comes to the root of the argument, it is actually an ontological argument, an argument concerning the very nature of reality around us. There are only two possibilities. Either the universe and all of us came about through a purely natural physical process. In other words, we just happened, or somebody made us. So back to the question, what evidence is there to believe in creation story? Well, the story of creation is far more rational and scientific than evolution, as we can see in the laws of thermodynamics, the laws of biogenesis, and the laws of cause and effect. Also, as we look at the evidence of the geologic column and the glaring confirmation of animals in their kind. Now, let's briefly discuss each one. What makes more sense? A rational God who created a rational world that can be studied rationally, or an irrational, meaningless process that somehow created a rational world that can be studied rationally. It doesn't even make sense. The Big Bang, evolution, the millions of years, and the naturalistic origin of life, those are not scientific. Is Big Bang observable? The answer is no. Is it repeatable? No. Is millions of years observable and repeatable? No. Origin of life. Has anybody ever made life from the non-life? No. Evolution is not a scientific fact. The millions of years is also not a scientific fact. You have to understand that this theory violates the known discoveries and established laws of science. Okay, let's start with thermodynamics. Evolutionary theory claims that organisms get better ordered over time. from simpler to more complex organism. But the second law of thermodynamics holds that entropy increases, that is, systems over time become more disordered. To illustrate this, if you toss and throw several bricks off a truck, which kind of pile of bricks would you likely produce? Is it this or this? Of course, the random-looking bricks. The randomness of the bricks is what the second law of thermodynamics means. The fact is, entropy increases in the universe. That is the accepted fact. The randomness increases too. The higher the entropy, the higher the disorder. And so the theory that claims that organisms evolve into more complex forms but get better ordered over time violates this established law of physics. In other words, the theory of evolution that everything came from simple to complex with fascinating order as we see the world and the universe around contradicts to the established law of thermodynamics, because the constant rise of entropy means more randomness and chaos instead of the designed, perfectly balanced, fine-tuned planet and the order of the universe that we see right now. If ever evolution happened, and if it happened on its own, it should have been an evolution of chaos and randomness by now, instead of harmony, order, and balance that we see all around us. Then there's the law of biology. It's called the law of biogenesis. The law of biogenesis says that all life comes from pre-existing life. And yet evolution says that life can come from non-life. So weird that every atheistic evolutionist actually, in essence, believes in the spontaneous generation of life, at least once. But we see no examples or evidence of non-life turn into life. Anytime they have done these sorts of origin of life experiments, where they're trying to take a soup of all these different molecules, add a little bit of lightning, cook everything together, add a spark, and out comes a useless gunk. They have to do a lot of tweaking to come up with the best results. And what is that? Amino acids. No life. No meaningful information as far as real DNA is concerned. The odds for 250 chemical parts coming together is 2 times 1004 to the power of 6. That is 2 with 46 zeros following after it. And those are the terrible odds for the first cell to even come into existence all by itself. It is impossible for these natural causes to come together to form life on their own. The other thing why evolution does not make sense whatsoever is on one of the most fundamental laws of science, the law of cause and effect. For every material effect we see, there is a cause that came before it or simultaneous to it. Evolution claims that somehow matter had spontaneously come into existence without a prior cause. The idea that the universe popped into existence from nothing is simply not a scientific idea. You see, they postulate that the origin of the Big Bang is caused by this thing called singularity. That singularity is natural, but it suddenly behaves supernatural. And so in essence, the Big Bang did not follow the laws of nature. It was supernatural. Physically, the universe and our planet has no natural explanation. It doesn't have a physical explanation. That's why, in essence, they are admitting that the miracle really happened, but it happened all by itself. But for the creationists, that miracle, that supernatural, points to the Creator who caused the natural things to assemble and supernaturally turned into the reality that we have now. That is cause and effect. The effect was supernatural through a supernatural cause. We were taught in school that each layer represents a different period of time, and it was deposited over millions of years, these geologic columns. But in reality, each layer is simply showing the order of how things were buried. Both land and sea creatures alike are found throughout the geologic column. Sea creatures are found from the lowest to the highest layers, and even on top of the mountains. In fact, 90% of the Earth's land surface is made up of sedimentary layers, which are rock layers that formed in water. And geologists also confess that the Earth is riddled with massively eroded features, just like the Grand Canyon in America, the Blythe River Canyon in South Africa, and the Kapiti Valley in Australia. And yet they still refuse to acknowledge a worldwide flood. There shall come into the last days scoffers who are willingly ignorant that the earth, being overflowed with water, perished. You see, 2,000 years ago, Peter warned us that this rejection of truth would happen. Fossils are actually not the evidence of the history of life. Fossils are the evidence of death of all life during Noah's flood and how all those things got buried. There are sea creatures all the way through the rock record. And we find sea creatures on the tops of the highest mountains. There are sea creatures on the tops of Himalayas, the Alps, the Andes, and the Rockies. The question is, how did they get up there? Creatures don't have any hard parts, such as fossilized worms and even fossilized animal manure. How can a fossilized animal manure be fossilized slowly and gradually over thousands of years? It doesn't happen. The reason why even a delicate worm is fossilized is because it was buried in an instant as an activity of the worldwide flood. In 2009, Mary Schweitzer, a paleontologist and evolutionist, made the popularized discovery of soft tissues in a dinosaur bone, which included blood vessels and cells, DNA and proteins, all of which decay very quickly. Mary Schweitzer herself said, "This flies in the face of everything we understand about how tissues and cells degrade. I can't explain it, to be honest." Schweitzer can't explain it, and neither can her colleagues, who also cling to the evolutionary paradigm. Those are some of the biblical and scientific reasons why we should not accept those millions of years. The next is animals in their kind. In the creation account, it says that God created according to their kind or after their kind, not through any evolutionary processes. You don't have one kind developing into another kind or sorts. They are all created according to their kind. So even though you get variety, they are not changing into other things. Bacteria are not changing into more complex creatures. Yes, you can have great variation within a kind. You can get different species forming, which is what Darwin really saw. But there are limits. There are no mechanisms there at all in genetics to add new information that never existed in order to change it into a totally different kind. Dogs always remain dogs. Cats always remain cats. There is nothing in observational science to contradict that every animal will bring forth after its own kind. You can observe that in the existing creation and in the fossil record. Genesis passes the tests of the scientific method. Evolution doesn't. The final evidence that I would like to share with you, there are more, but the last one which I would like to share with you is the evidence of morality. Why do we have it? In the natural process, it is thought that there was a Big Bang. After that, there were eons of years and man slowly evolved. And that itself is a really big problem. If we simply happen, then there really is no right or wrong. We could just live our lives the way we wish to. Think of the evil things happening around: inequality, racism, corruption, murder, and selfish actions that deplete natural resources and destroy the environment. Why would we cry out and complain about those things whenever we see them? If atheistic evolution is true, then we just get used to it because evolution is all about the survival of the fittest. There is no law from the evolutionary paradigm to tell us of any morality because all of us are just accidents and that we evolved through the process of time without any hand guiding it. So when you start to assert the idea that murdering innocents is evil, then you are equally and automatically asserting a standard of morality. A naturalist cannot explain to us moral reasoning. When a naturalist sees a predator taking another animal as prey to kill and eat, they say it's just the way of the wild. It's natural. When a mother pig eats its own piglet she just gave birth to, the naturalist would say it's normal for some animals to do that. But why put a moral responsibility on humans? If humans are simply animals, how did we end up with morality and reasoning as our reality? How on earth did it happen if we came from nothing plus matter plus chance processed in an irrational, non-moral beginning through eons of time and with moral reasoning? That alone tells you that humans are different and above the animals from the very beginning. The reality is we are not the beasts in the wild. The moral capacity is placed within you and me. We're not animals. We're different from them. We are created in the image of God. Human beings have court systems. We believe in justice, truth, and in righteousness because we are made in the image of God. We are moral creation. It comes to us from the absolute, non-contradictory person of God. In Him there is no lie, there is no ambiguity, and He gave us the 10 Commandments as absolutes and can be summed up to say that life is given to you is sacred. Your time is sacred, your properties are sacred, and so are your neighbors. It did not come from nothing. It came from a moral law given by a moral lawgiver. And the Jewish race is still with us today. They are not extinct. They can testify to the historical narrative and the accuracy of the account that God gave to Moses, the 10 Commandments, which became the universal moral code of the civilized nations on planet Earth. Jesus came, and Jesus was a real figure in history, written by Josephus, Tacitus, Pliny the Younger, the account from the Babylonian Talmud, and from the works of Lucian. These historians are outside of the Bible. They were not Christians. They wrote about Jesus from an objective stance. And Jesus then is a real figure in history, confirmed the legitimacy of creation and confirmed the validity of the story of Moses. The secularists and the atheists took control of science, the science journals, and all the university science programs. They have taken over the museums, the public schools. They have taken over the universities, the main textbooks for students all over the world. They have the control of the educational system, and they want their religion of secularism, of atheism, of naturalism forced upon the students. In the West, there is no real separation of church and state, because the state is forcing a religion on generations of kids, that everything can be explained by natural processes only, and that is atheistic evolution. They hijack science, and they convince the whole world that science is only possible within an atheistic worldview. Evolution in millions of years is the greatest myth ever forced into the minds of human beings. They eliminate the supernatural. Their theory is actually a religion. It is a religion of atheism. It actually requires more faith to believe in atheistic evolution than to believe in the accounts of Genesis.
Thank you so much, Pastor. That was an amazing presentation. But I want to take you back to Genesis. You've told us about how we cannot believe in the millions and millions of years. But then I want to ask, did God really take 6 days? Are the days of creation, are they ordinary days? If so, how long were the days? Are they really 24 hours?
Okay, when we read the first chapter of Genesis, we have to ask, what kind of text is this? What type of literature is this? Is Genesis supposed to be a poetry? Is it supposed to be an allegory? Don't forget that Genesis is written in historical narrative Hebrew, not in lyrical poetic form. It is written in historical style. And it's meant to be taken as straightforward literal history. The Bible clearly says that God created everything in 6 literal days, just like our days. Jesus Christ himself referred to Genesis on multiple occasions, and each time referring to Genesis, he refers to it as real history. So in order to add millions of years between verse 1 and verse 2 in Genesis, you have to deal with the grammar of text. And the grammar of text doesn't allow that, because the Hebrew is very clear in the syntax and the grammar. Now, there are people who say they don't believe it, but no one can say that the Hebrew word yom does not mean a 24-hour day right there, where it says it's a day. See, it says first day, it says second day, it says third day, the fifth, sixth. So each of these days was an ordinary, approximately 24-hour day period. In fact, that is why in Exodus chapter 20, verse 11, God said that he made everything in 6 days and rested for one, as a basis for a 7-day week. So you see, the 7-day week actually comes from the Bible. You have to note this very, very carefully. The 7-day week does not come from any other worldview. Okay? And we have this 7-day cycle that we call the week. And there is no astronomical basis for this? And why do we have a 7-day cycle that is fairly universal among cultures all over the world? Where did we get it? There, we cannot find it in any scientific book, in any historical book, in any books on this planet, except in the ancient Hebrew, which is Genesis. So you have the 6 days of creation, and then the 7th day God rested. So God made everything in 6 days, and he rested for 1. Thank you.
So do you mean that the evening and morning were literal evenings and mornings?
Exactly.
I want to ask another question. That the sun in the text of Genesis says it was created on the 4th day. But then, how can there be days and evenings if the sun was created on the 4th day? Because there was no sun to regulate the rising and setting of, or the sunrise or the sunset.
Okay. In the beginning, God created all the matter in space, and especially the formless earth. Now, the statement in the beginning indicates that time began with the initial creation of matter and energy. And today, physicists describe time as a function of matter. Now, how an approximately 24-hour day period was determined before the 4th day, because the sun was created on the 4th day? Well, Genesis makes it very clear that the light was divided, okay, giving both day and night to earth. And if I read Genesis chapter 1, verses 3 to 5, actually it says that God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. And God saw the light, that it was good. And God divided the light from darkness. God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. And evening and the morning were the first day. So on the very first day, it was determined by God to have a particular light, that light. The light that God created even before the sun was created. So God already divided this light from darkness. There was a division of night and day already. So then the passage of time is not linked to the sun. Why? Because it is already declared that there was night and day. It was already declared the first day, even before the arrival of the sun. So that the sun is not the determiner of time is actually observable and repeatable around us. We actually measure time in days, even when we cannot see the sun. For instance, the submariners who spend months under the water and often weeks at a time in the darkness beneath the polar ice cap have no difficulty measuring a day. The same is true for astronauts in space who see many days each day. And actually, the rotation of the Earth as well can be, we can verify the counting of that through the rotation of the Earth, not just by the setting or the rising of the sun. Thank you. I don't know if you have any other words to add to that.
I would like to add that when the light was created on the first day, it was a source of light, and we did not need the sun. So since we count the earth, the day by the rotation of the earth, 24 hours. Once there's a direction of the sun, of the light, once we have a direction, we will always have a sunrise and a sunset. It may not be actual sun, but once there's light, we can always count the time that we have on earth. And so we don't need the sun, as you said, to really count the time on earth. Once God is our light, once he created light, we have the days that we need to keep time on earth. So thank you so much, Pastor. I want to ask another question, which is quite interesting to me, is that, we have Adam and Eve, our mother and our father. How can we all come from Adam and Eve? We have the Chinese, we have the African, we have the Caribbeans, we have the Red Indians, we have the Caucasians. How can we all come from Adam and Eve? How is that possible?
In Matthew 19:14, Jesus says that, "Let the children come to me and do not forbid them, for of such is the kingdom of heaven." He did not distinguish between skin colors. In fact, scientists have discovered that there is one major pigment called melanin that produces our skin color. There are two main forms of melanin: the eomelanin that can make a person's skin color brown to black, and the pheomelanin that can make a person's skin red to yellow. And these combine to give us the particular shade of skin that we have. So Actually, we all have the same basic color, just the different shades of it. We all share the same pigments. Our bodies just have different combinations of them. And we know that Adam and Eve were the first two people. Their descendants filled the earth. However, the world's population was reduced to 8 during the flood of Noah. And from these 8 individuals have come all the tribes and nations. And it's likely from this, the skin of Noah, we could presume that his family was middle brown, I guess, and this would enable his sons and their wives to produce a variety of skin shades in just one generation. But because there was a common language at that time and everybody lived in the same general vicinity, barriers that may have prevented their descendants from freely intermarrying were not as great as they are today. Therefore, the distinct differences in features and skin color in the population were not as prevalent as they are today. In Genesis 11, we read that there was a rebellion at the Tower of Babel, and God judged that rebellion by giving them different languages. The difficulty of understanding one another forced them to split apart. And so each extended family going on its own way and finding a different place to live. The result was that the people were scattered over the earth. And because of the new language and the geographic barriers, the groups no longer freely mixed with other groups. And the result was a splitting of the gene pool. Different cultures formed with certain features becoming predominant within each group. So the characteristics of each became more and more prominent as new generations of children were born. So the dispersion of Babel broke up the large interbreeding group of humanity into smaller groups with less genetic variability. There is also an additional little factor of adaptation. I certainly look a lot lighter now than 15 years ago when I first came from the Philippines. Every time I go back home for a holiday, everyone would notice that my skin shade is lighter. I wonder if you would like to add more to what I've already said. You are muted, Doc.
Okay, thank you, Pastor. I think you answered it perfectly. I would like to ask a question from the chat, which is, how will you explain the dinosaurs, and as well, why are they extinct?
Dinosaurs, oldest beasts, were created in the 6th day. Okay, there is a account in the Bible, particularly of God speaking to Job, that Job, look at the behemoth which I created, and God went into describing in details how big, how huge this behemoth, this creature is. And in fact, the tail is as big as the cedar tree, that not even the flood, it's not even disturbed by any flood. He's so big, he's so huge. And God said, I created the behemoth and all of that. And of course, the word dinosaur is not in the Bible because it's coined in the late 1800s only. But the word dragon, okay, the word behemoth, and even leviathan are in the Bible. And the descriptions of this behemoth, leviathan, and dragons are actually mesh and match with the description and the fossil records and we found of dinosaurs. So we also go to the ancient literature and their poetry and history. And we can see even in the drawings of the caves that people are actually, they live along with dinosaurs together, which is different from the paradigm or the story or the narrative of evolution that dinosaurs must have lived billions of years before man, otherwise man will just be eaten by them. But the creationist or the Bible story records that man and beast live together.
So from the previous question, doesn't we all come from the same DNA pool, talking about Adam and Eve? And also there's a question, being asked that, did God create other people apart from Adam and Eve?
No, he only created Adam and Eve according to the Bible.
So does it mean we all came from the same DNA pool? Then how come there are so many? Yeah. Okay. So we're almost out of time, but I'd like to ask one more question. Okay. Is that what evidence is there to prove a young Earth, like from science, apart from what you've already said?
Okay. We understand that the sun is powered by nuclear fusion, and that could power the sun for many, 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 many years. Now, as it produces energy like that, it changes its composition inside, and over time, it should slowly brighten. Now, and as it does, the Earth would get warmer. Now, again, over thousands of years, this is not a problem. Okay, but if go back a couple of billion to 3 billion years ago, when life supposedly first developed on the planet, according to the evolutionist narrative, you have a problem because the Earth would have been far colder. It would have been frozen, and nobody thinks that happened. So in billions of years, it's a problem. But in thousands of years, the Earth, not a problem. In fact, other planets in our solar system testify to a young universe as well, because both the density and the magnetic field of Mercury cannot allow for millions of years. In 1984, creationist Dr. Russell Humphreys correctly calculated the magnetic fields of Uranus and Neptune. That was several years before the Voyager 2 satellite would actually measure them. Humphreys used a vital clue from the Bible, and that the universe was made only about 6,000 years ago. And when the surface of Venus was mapped in the mid-90s, volcanoes, craters, mountains, and other features showed the history of the planet as young. Neptune is too hot to be old. Pluto has nitrogen in its atmosphere. The rings of Saturn and Neptune are not uniform as they would have, and as they wouldn't be after millions of years. So the question is, do we trust in the timeline of men, or who are repeatedly wrong and having to change their beliefs all the time? Or do we have to trust in the Bible, which has never been proven wrong and does not change?
Thank you so much, Pastor. I would like to add to that quite quickly is that if we look on Earth and we look at the amount of sediment in the sea and the salinity of the sea currently, and you project it backwards, there's no way it's millions of years old, because even taking out Noah's flood, which accounts for the great amount of sediment and salt in the sea, we still have just about 10,000 years. So even on Earth, we have proof that the Earth is not millions of years old. So I'll thank you so much, Pastor, and I'll hand over the session to Leroy. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Naomi. That was very, very interesting. So as we conclude for this evening, that brings us to the end of another packed program. And tomorrow's topics include secrets to a longer life, dealing with addictions, and why is there so much suffering in the world if there is a loving, all-knowing God? So please remember to leave your feedback on the website, totaltransformationseminars.com. So please join us again tomorrow evening at 7 for another Total Transformation Seminar. Good night and see you tomorrow evening.